Hello, I'm Seamoose, and today I have an Overwatch discussion. So for this video, I'm going to talk about something that's very, very important to the growth of Overwatch. I'm going to talk about esports, tournaments, competitive Overwatch, and the future. For those of you who don't know, and I'll make sure to link this in the description, recently it was announced that Turner Broadcasting Service, who partner with Eleague and Faceit, are going to be hosting an Overwatch major on live national television, which is super awesome. For those of you who watch or follow Counter-Strike, Eleague is something that they are currently in the middle of running. I'm actually not entirely sure if it's concluded. I don't follow Counter-Strike that much, but for the most part, it was a really nice production. They had a lot of, obviously, great teams represented, and they had all the top talent for Eleague. Overwatch has not had a major with the prize pool the size of this prize pool coming up for the Eleague. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Gamescom major was announced, a $100,000 tournament, and that was the biggest tournament up until that point. It was also the most significant Overwatch LAN that we've seen, or will see, I should say. But now that this TBS, this Eleague announcement was made, this sort of blows it out of the water. And it's both very exciting because I think it's awesome that they're making some amazing Overwatch tournaments that they're going to happen soon, but it's also a little bit frightening, to be completely honest. Overwatch is the first game, the first potential esport that grew during this era of esports. If you look at all of the major games, you look at games like League of Legends, you look at CS, you look at even less represented games like Melee or other games like Dota, all of these games, StarCraft, all of these major esports had scenes that were basically built off of the success of the game itself. But because Overwatch was released so late in 2016, now the idea of esports is a thing that already exists in the minds of many people, many players, many investors, potential personalities, potential viewers, etc. And the issue that occurs when you have this sort of scene, this established industry of esports, whenever a new game comes out, everyone is automatically going to think, is this going to be an esport? And certainly with Overwatch, that is the case. A lot of people think Overwatch will be a very successful esport. I think so far it's been built very well, and I think it definitely has the chance to be a huge potential esport. But the thing is, there's still a lot of organic growth that needs to occur. Tournaments like the Eleague or Gamescom are so high profile that it's gonna tune people's attention towards the game, potentially even before the game is well developed enough to have such a big following. If you look like a game like League of Legends, for example, this is one of the games that I have the most background in, which is why this is the comparison I'll make from the get-go. League of Legends had a couple of years before it ever really had a professional esports scene. There were tournaments and such, but the idea of a competitive gaming league that Riot has produced was never considered a valid or viable thing. And certainly the idea that there could be so many teams that are making enough money to travel around and compete in tournaments before the league was established, the LCS was established, was also just not really super common. I mean, you had the top teams that would compete, but before League of Legends and Riot Games made the LCS, esports as a whole was still considered a very niche market without any major production. With the advent of the LCS, though, everything sort of changed. Obviously, League of Legends leveled up, and games followed suit. Counter-Strike, for example, is a fantastic example of a game that has a huge, spectacular following, and a little bit of that is due to reasons besides the game itself and the gameplay, but still, those two are probably the most successful esports, and they've gone about being successful in different ways, but the one thing both of those games have in common is that they had organic growth, and that's a couple of years in time when the spectator issues had to be worked on, when the players and the personalities would learn, when they'd actually get better and better, and teams would get stronger and stronger, and they both also grew up sort of at the same time, and they both became these massive esport juggernauts that they are today because they had time to develop. Now with Overwatch, it's in a bit of a different situation. Overwatch has had a lot of money funded into it, funneled into it from the get-go, and a lot of people saying this is going to be an esport, this is going to be an esport. You have investors looking at the game saying this is going to be the next big thing. You have players saying I'm going to be the next professional Overwatch player. I'm going to be the next superstar. And to a certain extent, that's true. We already definitely have personalities. We have Seagull. We have the top team, Envious. There are followings that are being developed. But as of right now, the game still has issues. For example, spectator mode is still not incredibly good, I would say, honestly. It has a lot of work to go. And the issue is, when you have such massive tournaments with a lot of people watching, if the production level isn't at a good enough level, those people who watch, those new spectators who watched because they heard of something interesting, will be driven away. If a lot of people watch the Eleague finals in late September, and it turns out that spectator mode is still very raunchy, and they're like, okay, Overwatch doesn't look like a fun game, then the Overwatch community suffers as a result. And I'm sure this is something that Blizzard is aware of. It's a pretty obvious issue, and there are some pretty big things that Blizzard can probably, and is probably working on behind the scenes that'll be introduced when we see the Eleague and we see the Gamescom finals, but you still have to wonder. And the most important thing for me is probably just spectator. Right now, the spectator mode is not really conducive to understanding the game. It's not conducive to enjoying the game. It's pretty rough to watch, completely honestly, guys. I know there are, I'm sure, a lot of you who will watch professional teams play in your favorite tournaments and your favorite teams are watching, but you just don't really see what's going on. The two options you have right now are either third-person view or first-person view. And if you're in third-person view, you miss the beauty of the FPS skills. You miss the ability for players to have these fantastic shots. That just goes away. But if you're in first-person view, you're just getting one perspective, and you don't really see all the action that's actually happening in the game. Some of the most best moments are when there are team fights, and it's a shame because you don't get to see the intensity of every player shooting in that team fight, because you might need to go in third person so you just have an idea of what the team fight looks like. That being said, though, as far as observing is concerned and presentation of the game itself, that is something that will get better over time. I have absolute faith that that is the case, and I think right now Overwatch is not in a good place in terms of its spectatability, but I think there's a lot of work that can be done, and I might throw out a few of my own ideas in the future, but that'll be for a different video. I just want to keep this in reference to what this actually means for the near future. So considering spectatability, though, is an issue and needs to be addressed, like, that's probably what I think we'll find is the hardest thing to solve, and it also takes time. The nice thing about having low-key tournaments and a scene that builds up over time is that you have time for iteration. You have smaller tournaments that do things, and eventually people will come out with different ideas, like a better way to spectate, or a better way to host a tournament, or even to do administrative things like running a bracket or whatever. And we as a community can take those tools on a low scale without much money in the scene and iterate on that and develop the scene by really working on it. As of right now, though, completely honestly, there are a ton of good tournaments and there's a ton of pretty good productions that are being made, but there isn't much that's happening in terms of innovation. Personally, I feel that production groups and teams and organizations can do a lot more production-wise. I think observer work has a lot to be desired, and I think this applies to casting too. The way Overwatch is currently casted, in my opinion, like the casting metagame, if you will, it has a lot to be desired. And the issue you have when you put a lot of emphasis on these early tournaments, when you have a ton of people watching, is that you have the potential of a undeveloped game being presented to a very hungry audience, and when they don't understand and they can't digest the information properly, they just think it's a crap game and it's just not worth the time. If we ever entered into a situation when Overwatch was denied a second Eleague season because the viewers didn't like it, I would be really sad. Like, that would be a big blow, because I don't think, like, I probably wouldn't think that the people who made that decision were making the wrong one. It's just that Overwatch still needs time to develop to be this really beautiful game, not only to play and to experience, but also certainly to watch and spectate and experience as well. And that's the main thing. That's what everyone here is trying to do. For different reasons, certainly. I want Overwatch to be successful as an esport because I think it's a super fun game to play. I think it has a lot of diversity, a lot of really interesting decisions and mind games that you have to do, but then it also has some awesome elements of skill. But that's my opinion. The investors might want the esports scene for Overwatch to grow because they want to make money off it, and that's fine. We both want the same thing, and that is for Overwatch esports to grow. But the difference is the opinion we have and why we want it to grow are for different reasons, and as a result, the priorities are like aligned a little bit differently. Blizzard, of course, is obviously a big part of this. They are supporting the Gamescom tournament. They are also supporting Eleague. And I'm certain that they want their esports presentation to be absolutely rock solid. But the issue is, like, if they are getting into this so soon and it doesn't work, then I think everyone is hurt for it, and especially the Overwatch community. There have been some rumors for quite a while now that eventually Blizzard is trying to do what Riot Games does with the LCS and have their own studio. Whether or not that is the case, I still think having many high-profile tournaments this early on without actually letting the tournament scene organically grow to that level is risky. Eventually, you would want to have these tournaments, and to be fair, it has been a couple of months since the game's released, and we've already seen some pretty medium-sized things like Beyond the Summit, for example, or the Josh OG Invitational, but I just wonder whether or not having a tournament scene and huge major tournaments this early into release is the best thing for the game. Anyway, though, that's just my thought. You guys can disagree, you guys can agree what you will, but that is going to wrap it up for this Overwatch discussion video. I'm going to be back tomorrow with a Lucio guide, starting with the basic guide and then so on. And yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I hope you all have a good one. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.